Hello everyone, my name is Ivo and welcome to Cooking with the Koyas. For those of you who are gluten intolerant, today folks I'm going to share with you my recipe for gluten-free gnocchi. If you want to see my regular recipe for gnocchi, I'll put a link in the description for you. But today folks, it's all about gluten-free gnocchi, and let's get started right now. So we're going to start with, we've got a pot of water here, and into the pot of water we are going to put some potatoes. Now I like to use either the red potato or a yellow flesh potato. Those are my two favorite potatoes for making gnocchi, and in this case gluten-free gnocchi. So as you can see, I'm just with a knife, I'm just kind of piercing the skin all the way around. And what we're going to do folks, we're going to boil these potatoes. In fact, let's turn the stove on. We want to bring these potatoes to a boil. Once the water comes to a boil, we're going to let the water boil for about 30 minutes, 25 to 30 minutes, depending on the size of the potatoes. And for these potatoes, it'll probably take 30 minutes. So we're going to boil these from 30 minutes, and then we'll come back and do the next step. So we've been boiling for 30 minutes. Time to shut it down. Okay, our potatoes should be cooked right through now. Okay, we're going to remove them from our water. So with our potatoes cooked right through, first of all, the reason we left the skin on is to retain the nutrients while the potatoes were boiling. You can let these cool a bit, but I'm just going to show you the other reason why we put that little scarring on the potato before we boiled was just to make it easier for the skin to come off. When it boils, the water gets underneath and it just makes it easier to remove the skin. So what I'm going to do right now folks, I will remove the skin from all these potatoes while they're still relatively hot. With our potatoes all peeled, now what we want to do is weigh them, and as you can see they're still warm. So I'm going to use grams, but you could certainly use ounces. It's not a problem because the recipe is going to be generic, so it doesn't matter what weight measurement you use. But in this case we've got I'm going to make a note of that, 1.043 kilos. And just in case you're wondering, that's 2 pounds, 4.8 ounces, almost 2 pounds and 5 ounces, but I like to go with grams. Okay, 1.043 kilos. Now that we have the weight, we no longer need that. What we want to do now is begin to process our potatoes, and it's best to do them while they're still relatively hot, but they process easier. And for that folks, we're going to use a ricer. If you've never seen or used a ricer before, these are absolutely fantastic for making mashed potatoes and of course for making gnocchi. Basically, you put your potato in and then squeeze the handle, and then out comes the potato. Okay, and you usually get some overflow here. That's no problem. I grab the overflow, put it back in, grab another potato. And if the potatoes are too big, you just, cut them in half. Okay, see how it comes out very, very nicely? So let me continue doing that. So we're going to do this to all our potatoes. You can see how it comes out here. It's pretty neat actually. Yeah. And there we go. Our last one is now done. Okay, so at this point folks, the first step is done. And what we have to do now is just let our potato cool. It has to be cooled completely, 100% cool, before we continue. Otherwise, if we add our flour now, all we're going to make is a doughy mess. So this has got to sit. So I typically like to do this in the morning. That way it can just sit all day long, and then I make the gnocchis about an hour before dinner. So I'm just going to let this sit and cool, and we'll come back to it later this afternoon. With our potatoes now cooled, it's time to make our dough. Now, These are two gluten-free flours. This particular one here, the CAPUTO Fioreglut, is the preferred. However, it is a little bit pricey, usually around $20 for a bag. So because of that, I'm going to use a more economical gluten-free flour. We're going to use this NAMASTE flour. Okay, but if you can afford it, this is by far the best. Okay, but like I say, for today, we're going to use this one, a little more economical, and we have to weigh it. So what I did with the potatoes, I removed a little bit, so we have 1 kilo exactly, which is 1,000 grams. So what you do, it's one formula. You take 40% of your potato weight and you add that in flour. So 40% of 1,000 is 400. So we need 400 grams. Very, very easy, simple math, right? 40% of your potato weight in flour. So there's 366. And 401. 402. Okay, we'll just remove a little. Might as well be exact, right? We have a scale. By all means, folks, you need a scale. Scale is so important, and they're not expensive. And you could use a scale for so many things in the kitchen. It's really a necessity for many different recipes, not just gnocchis. Okay. All right, so we're going to add our flour to our potato. And to that, another simple formula, we're going to add some salt. This is just regular table salt, fine table salt. And the way the recipe goes is, for every 500 grams of potatoes, you use 2 teaspoons of flour. So here I had 1,000 grams, I used 4 teaspoons, of salt. So it's 2 teaspoons of salt for every 500 grams of potatoes. That's how much you add total for your gnocchi. Once the salt is added, we're going to add 1 egg. This is going to help bind our gnocchi. So if for some reason you cannot eat eggs, by all means you can avoid the egg, but I highly recommend it. And now, quite simply, work all those ingredients together. Usually I do this right on the counter because it's much easier. In fact, I think I'm going to do that. Let's just do that, folks. Let's go right on the counter. Okay? All right, now we can work a little bit better. So it looks a little crumbly, and that's normal, but what you want to do is just squeeze everything together, and eventually it's going to come together and form a dough. So don't worry, just keep squeezing it all together. And what's happening is, little by little, that gluten-free flour is absorbing the potato. So just kind of keep squeezing it together. You can see it's already starting to come together. Just keep working it. It'll come, just keep working it, pressing it together, kneading it together. The more you do it, the more the flour absorbs the potato. And you can see we're starting to form our dough. So once you get to this stage, I would recommend kneading it by just pushing down with the palm of your hand. Roll it and push it, roll it and push it, and you're going to want to knead it for about 5 minutes. I like to use both palms at the same time. And let's do this for 5 minutes. So actually, it's been about 3 minutes, and our dough has come together quite nicely, so I think we're going to stop at that. Okay, there you can see, there's our dough. So it also now needs to rest for a few minutes. So we knead it for, well, in this case, 3 minutes, 3 up to 5. So now we're going to let it rest 3 to 5 minutes. Now that our dough has rested nicely, we can begin making our gnocchis. So, cut a little section off, okay? And then you want to shape this into a round like a snake. Try not to let it fall apart on you. Kind of keep it all together. Okay, just like that. Now, you want to have some flour, extra flour close by. So if you use the CAPUTO flour to make your main dough, use a less expensive flour for this part, because this is just to prevent from sticking. So here, we're just going to cut on an angle a bit, like that. And we're going to make these about 1.5 inches, and then the last piece, well, it is what it is. But you try to make them all about the same size. Toss them up in this flour and put them off to the side. Okay, so same thing. Let's get this little piece that broke off on us. So it doesn't handle like your normal dough, so you have to be a little bit patient making the gluten-free gnocchi. But basically you roll them out into like a snake-like shape, or I guess as thick as your finger, right? And then again, a little bit of flour. And I like to cut on an angle a bit. There we go. And with the regular gnocchis, I normally put a dimple in them, but these are too delicate, so we're just going to leave them just like that. And then cut another piece of dough and begin to shape it again into a round. As the dough sits a little longer, it gets a little bit easier to work with. You just have to be a little bit more gentle with this dough compared to the regular gnocchi dough with regular flour. Okay, that looks pretty good right about there. Alrighty, same thing. Let's just add a little bit of flour and then cut on an angle about 1.5 inches. Toss them up in the flour so they don't stick. There we go, isn't that nice? Gluten-free gnocchi right there, folks. Okay, put them into a pan and continue. So I'm going to continue this process until this complete dough is done. And in case you're wondering, this was, if you remember, it was 1 kilo of potato, which is 1,000 grams. Well, that will feed at least 4 people. So as a general rule, 250 grams of potato will feed 1 person, which is equivalent to 1 large potato per person. General rule if you're trying to figure out portions. So this will feed 4 people because it's 1,000 grams. Okay, so I'm going to continue working this gnocchi and finish this complete loaf. So we're coming to the end of our dough. And again, just kind of gently work it, and if it falls apart, just kind of squeeze it together, okay? There we go. Almost there. Now you could also see I filled this tray very nicely, and I've got a little bit left over here, which I'm going to put into that bowl. I'll take my last piece. Again, just kind of work it with your fingers and kind of squeeze it into the shape that we need, that round shape, and then very gently roll it. If you do it too hard, it'll fall apart on you. But again, if it does, just kind of squeeze it together. Now, as I mentioned, that CAPUTO flour, folks, handles much, much better. But again, it's more expensive. So we went with the economical flour, and it's still working out just fine. Okay, we get our last piece going. Okay, a little bit of flour. And we are now done. So, what I have here, folks, this tray, I'm actually going to freeze this. because I have some guests coming for dinner next week who are gluten-free. So we will freeze this. I'm going to freeze it just the way it is, and then overnight, and then tomorrow they'll be all individually frozen. I'll be able to take them out and put them in a freezer bag loose and then cook them from frozen. However, this little bit extra that we have here, of course, folks, I'm going to do the taste test, even though I am not gluten intolerant. But let's see what these gnocchis taste like. So I've got a little pot of water going right now. We're going to bring it to a boil and cook these up and do the taste test. Our water is boiling, so we are going to add some salt to our water. And you want to add about 3/4 of a tablespoon of salt for every liter of water that you're cooking with. All right, so you bring the water to a boil, and then we're going to add our gnocchis. And these need to cook now. When they all start to float, what I do is I give them about another minute, and then I take them out. At that point, they're done. After they float, okay, 30 to 60 seconds. But you could even, if you're not sure, just take one out and taste it. Then you'll know for sure if it's cooked or not. So they don't take long to cook, but as you can see, they've all sunk to the bottom. And once they're cooked, they'll start to float up a bit. So I had to put the heat down to medium because on high it was a real vigorous boil. But you could see here through the foam, see how they're starting to float there now? So I'm just going to give them another 30 seconds or so, and we're going to do the taste test. See how they're floating up? And you could see this vigorous boil. If I put the flame back up to high, that's what I was dealing with right there. Okay, let's bring it back down. Okay, we don't want to overflow. So medium heat is perfectly fine. As long as it's boiling, you're perfectly fine. All right, and in fact, you can see they're all on the top there now. So I'm going to remove these at this point. They're all floating. So drain them a bit and into a plate. There we go. And one last one. Okay, so I'm going to dress this up with a little bit of our homemade sauce. I have a little bit on the go right here. Now, if you want to see the recipe for the classic Italian tomato sauce, I have a great recipe for you, and I will put a link in the description for you folks, because the sauce recipe is fantastic. In fact, if you want to even make a Bolognese sauce with this gnocchi, you could do that too, and I have a fantastic Bolognese sauce recipe for you as well. Okay, they are now covered in sauce. You know what I need to do next, folks. Parmigiano Reggiano, a little bit of chilies, and the taste test. Oh yes, folks, that's what I'm talking about right there. A little bit of chili peppers, some freshly grated Parmigiano Reggiano cheese. Oh yeah. Oh, that's looking good. Okay, give me my fork, folks. We got to dig into this. Oh yes, folks. Always, always, always my favorite part. Okay, but today they happen to be a gluten-free gnocchi. They're still steaming hot, but you know, I just can't wait. We got to dig in and give it a try. So, texture seems really good. Hey, there's a gnocchi here, right? I like to scoop up a little bit of sauce with the cheese. Tell you what, the texture is absolutely perfect. They're not falling apart, that's for sure. They are semi-firm, but not too firm. Even if you're not gluten intolerant, these gnocchis are every bit as good. Yeah, granted, they're a little bit harder to work with when you make them. They taste a little bit different, of course, but you know what, folks? Seriously? And And for those of you who are gluten intolerant, basically what you have here is regular gnocchi. If you long for those days where you used to have great homemade Italian gnocchi, but you had to give it up because you were gluten intolerant, those days are over. You're now in for a treat because this, folks, is absolutely delicious. You'd never know it was gluten-free if I didn't tell you. Of course, a nice Italian sauce helps, and the condiments, Parmigiano cheese, a little bit of chili pepper, beautiful. Folks, next time you need to make gnocchi, if you know someone who's gluten intolerant or you are yourself, give this recipe a try. It comes together quickly and easily. The only time needed is the cooling time for the potatoes. Other than that, it's not hard at all. Actually, it's very, very easy. Thanks for tuning in and spending time with me in the kitchen. And as always, folks, until next time, buon appetito. Too bad I'm freezing the rest of those because you know what? I would like more than just this little sampler plate. Delicious.